Right, I'm going to start the meeting now. It's now 2 o'clock. So good afternoon and welcome to the Constitution and Ethics Committee, 22nd of April 2020. This is the second of the County Council live committee meetings that we've had today. You're all extremely welcome. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the provision set out in the local authorities and police and crime panels, coronavirus, flexibility of local authority and police and crime panel meetings, England and Wales. Regulations 2020 and with Cambridgeshire County Council's own virtual meeting protocol. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the Council website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphones muted, except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right-hand side of the screen. When you've ceased speaking, can you please lower your hand? When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again to allow the officer to respond. There will be no points of order or personal explanation. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there is always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. Please also note that to facilitate discussion, I intend to waive the committee procedure rule, limiting members' contribution to 5 minutes. I also propose to allow members to speak more than once on each item, if appropriate. However, make sure that your contributions remain concise and to the point. I will remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded. So members, I will begin by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your presence. Can you please confirm your presence after I've called your name? If you can unmute and say yes. Councillor Connor?
Yes.
Councillor Harford?
Yes.
Councillor Hickford?
Yeah.
Councillor Jenkins?
Yes.
Councillor Reynolds? Councillor Reynolds, he was here a minute ago. Do you know where he is? Reynolds?
Chairman, I think he needs to unmute.
Sorry?
He's still on mute.
Councillor Reynolds, can you unmute, please?
I have done. I was told to mute it, but whatever.
No, I've just asked you to unmute it so that you can confirm that you're here in the meeting.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Scott?
Yes, I confirm I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor? Councillor Taylor, she was here too. Councillor Taylor, can you unmute?
Yes, I'm present.
Yes, I can see you. Thank you. And myself, Councillor Every. So we can move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Officer please report any apologies for absence?
Yep, Councillor Kindersley has given his apologies and Councillor Taylor is here as his substitute.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? If you wish to do that, can you please raise your hand on the bottom of your participants, please? No, nobody has raised their hands for that, so we'll move on. So we can move to agenda item number 2, which is minutes of the meeting on the 14th of January 2020. Leaders have agreed that the minutes will be an electronic link to reduce the size of the agenda document pack. So we're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 14th of January 2020 as a correct record. Can I ask if any member who does not agree with this proposal to click the raised hand function on the right of your screen now, please? Okay. I see no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as a correct record, so we will take that as carried. So on the basis the recommendation to approve the minutes is carried, and I will sign a hard copy when we're So we now need to move on to agenda item number 3, committee structures. We have received a large amount of written submissions from members of the public related to this item. Can we all make sure that we're muted, please, because I can hear a dog and I don't have one. We also have some local members from the County Council and partner councils present to speak. First of all, I will ask the Democratic Services Manager to present the report, and then we will move on to the written statements and local members. Michelle, would you introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The report is divided into a number of sections. Section 2 relates to policy and service committees. Members will be aware that the Council passed a climate emergency motion in May 2019, which commits it to developing a climate change and environment strategy and action plan. The committee structures have been reviewed to provide sufficient focus on this issue. It is therefore proposed to abolish economy and environment and highways and infrastructure committees and replace them with an environment and sustainability committee and a highways and transport committee. The terms of reference for both are set out in the report. At the same time, the opportunity was taken to review the terms of reference of the other policy and service committees, and the changes are highlighted in the report. Section 3 relates to the Cambridge Joint Area Committee. The background to the establishment of this committee is set out in the report. Members will see that Cambridge City receives a different service compared to other districts, where there is already an established alternative process to make the decisions currently made by the Cambridge Joint Area Committee. It is therefore proposed to abolish the committee by the end of July 2020. Section 4 covers the Joint Development Control Committee for Cambridge Fringes. Again, the background to the establishment of this committee is set out in the report. It is proposed that the Council withdraw from this committee for the reasons set out in paragraphs 4.8 and 4.9. The date for withdrawal is the end of July. Finally, Section 5 relates to the membership of the General Purposes Committee. Paragraph 5.2 explains the importance of having the chair of each policy and service committee represented on the committee, which is not the case currently at the moment. It is therefore proposed to increase the membership from 15 to 17. The Executive Director for Place and Economy, the Service Director Highways and Transport, and the Interim Assistant Director Environment and Commercial Services are present to answer questions on the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michelle. We have received 39 written statements from members of the public. In accordance with the County Council's virtual meeting protocol, each person has been asked to submit their statement in writing. A copy of the statements has been circulated electronically to all members of the committee in advance of the meeting and published on the Council's website. I do not propose that each statement should be read out at the meeting. All members of the committee have had time to read and note the submissions. Instead, I propose to invite the Service Director Highways and Transport and the Interim Assistant Director Environment and Commercial Services to respond to the questions contained within the submissions. It would be helpful if officers could refer to the number of the question and the name of the questioner when making their response. So could I ask Graham Hughes to respond first, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Everly. As you said, there's 39 questions. I've read them all very carefully, and I think picking up particularly on the CJAC issues, I think all but 4 of them relate to either in whole or in part to the CJAC issues, and the 4 that I think don't address the CJAC issues are number 26 from Peter Studdert, number 32 from Daniel Zeichner MP, number 37 from Jane Patterson Todd, and number 39 from Councillor Mike Sargent, City Councillor Mike Sargent. So in what I'm going to say next, I'm addressing all of the remaining questions other than 26, 32, 37 and 39. Councillor Everly, having looked at them all, I think it's probably, rather than answering one by one, what I've done is I've looked at all of the questions. Now, I think actually what is being said by all of the 35 people who have written in, I think it really breaks down into three broad areas. So I was proposing to respond rather than question by question, but into those three broad areas. And I think the three areas that I see from the questions been raised are, first of all, around the loss of democratic accountability from the proposals before the committee today. Secondly, around whether, or indeed why, the proposal before the committee will be beneficial, as suggested in the report. And then finally, there's a reference to, in a number of the responses, to Cambridge being different to other parts of the county, and because the proposal essentially is to normalise the arrangements across the whole of the county. So there are points around that. So if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll answer in order those three points, and obviously very happy to take any questions from committee members on the points I make. So first of all, picking up the questions that have been raised about democratic accountability, I can absolutely understand the point that's being made by all of the people who have written in. But I do think that it's, in answering that, it's really important to set down very clearly what happens at the moment in Cambridge City and what is proposed in the future in Cambridge City. And hopefully by doing that, I can put local councillors and local residents' minds at rest in terms of this point that certainly was the subject of the majority of the questions. So in doing that, I think the first thing to point out is that in various questions, CJAC is referred to as a transport committee or similar. And I think it's important to recognise that CJAC, the Cambridge Joint Area Committee, is not a strategic committee. So its main role essentially is to determine traffic regulation orders and very, very localised issues. So it's not a committee that sets strategy, and it's not a committee that sets policy. So it's not a strategic committee. It's essentially responsible for putting in the detailed arrangements for issues that have already been decided strategically. And in fact, given the governance that we have in this area now, the strategic transport decisions are actually made by the combined authority. So that is where policy is set now, rather than in the county council. So then just to explain what happens at the moment and why the arrangements in our recommendation we think are effective. So at the moment, CJAC essentially deals with traffic regulation orders, and if an application for an order is made and there's no objections, the order will automatically be made. If there are objections, what officers try to do is to negotiate those objections away, and if they are negotiated away, then again the order is made. So it's only in instances where a traffic regulation order application is made and there are outstanding objections that would then be considered by CJAC. Now, there are quite a number of these that do go into CJAC. So I picked out the numbers for last year, and there were 44 TRO applications in Cambridge City, and of those 29 went to CJAC, and actually all of them but one were approved. So that's just an indication of the numbers. And it is fair to say in that current situation, obviously there are democratic processes throughout, from consultation through to the committee if that hears the issue. But I think just to explain to members what will happen in the future, I think that's really important. So I've just described those sort of three stages. Stages 1 and 2 in the new situation will be exactly the same. So if an order is made with no objections, or indeed those objections are negotiated away, the order would automatically be made. So the replacement for CJAC, the proposal, is that in the first instance, if a TRO comes forward and there are objections, that the first thing that would happen is that the Assistant Director Highways, to whom the delegation to make the decisions is made, will discuss with the local member, and will try to come to an agreement on how that TRO should proceed. It would only be the case that if between the Assistant Director Highways and the local member, if they did not reach agreement, at that point the chair of the relevant committee, so Highways and Transport, in the future, would then become involved in that discussion, and these discussions would all be formally documented. And only if through that process there was still not agreement, would the TRO actually end up in the Highways and Transport Committee itself. So I think, I mean, hopefully it's clear that there is lots of involvement, because clearly I would expect the local member to be working with the local community and feeding into those discussions. And that is the process that works in all of the other 4 districts of the county, and actually it works very well. And in fact, it's exceptionally rare. In fact, I think it's a number of years since a TRO has actually moved up into the Highways and Infrastructure Committee as it currently is, because arrangements haven't been agreed at a local level. So I think it's just important to explain that in a bit more detail. So there is, in the new situation, I think, clear democratic accountability, because the local member essentially is in the driving seat with the Assistant Director Highways in seeking to come to a decision on these TROs. And again, just coming back to the numbers, it would be on last year's performance 29 that would go through that process in Cambridge. So I think that just in terms of the questions leads me on, I think, to the second theme. And that is, why is that process, which is different to what happens at the moment, why would that be beneficial? And I think the main reason that we would argue for that is it's certainly more efficient in terms of officer time. There's an awful lot of officer time that goes into preparing reports and actually running the CJAC meetings. But I think the main thing is that that process will be a very, very lot quicker than the existing process. So currently CJAC meets 4 times a year, and the process with local member discussion that I've just talked about can happen effectively in a real-time basis. They have to be proper documented meetings, but they can happen as and when. So in the rest of the county, decisions on these orders are made very much quicker. I think the final thing I'd say on that, I mean, I should have mentioned it in relation to the new process. If anything does get up to committee, which I think we would anticipate will be rare in terms of these traffic regulation orders, local councillors and local residents have all the same rights that they currently do in terms of CJAC, because they can clearly submit questions and petitions to the committee. So all of those normal speaking rights exist within the Highways and Transport Committee, as with CJAC. I think just very briefly, Chair, that the final point I'd make, the third theme that I think I've picked out is a suggestion that Cambridge is very different to the rest of the county, and therefore should, by virtue of that difference, have separate arrangements. And I mean, I think clearly in terms of geography and the demographics, Cambridge City is different to, for example, the rural parts of our county. But I think in reality, because CJAC deals with just the detailed sort of local implementation decisions, I don't think that geographic or demographic basis makes much of a difference. I think that what we're proposing here is that the local member, who I would expect has more knowledge of the issues locally than the whole of the CJAC committee, actually is key to making those decisions. And so that accountability and the representation of that member's constituents, I think, can still come into the process. And again, from our experience, talking to colleagues across the county, talking to members, that process does work very well. So that sort of, I know sort of just puts the questions into just a number of sort of general categories, but having read them all, I think that, or I hope that picks up all of the themes in the individual questions that have been raised. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Graham. And could I remind members that at this moment in time, our officers are responding to the statements that we've had. And after the councillors have spoken, then there'll be another opportunity for clarification and questions to the officers. So could I ask Emma, please, to speak?
Thank you, Chair. So from the written statements that we've received, and members will have been passed a copy of, 11 specifically raised concerns surrounding the changes proposed for the JDCC, which I will effectively try and address and feedback on in turn. So in relation to written statement 3 received from CamCycle, the Cambridge Cycling Campaign, and also a written statement 8 from Alan Ackroyd, they touch upon concerns surrounding the democratic process and that city residents and councillors would be silent voices, to quote them. My response to that from a JDCC perspective is that the planning process allows for concerns and objections to be submitted by residents and councillors alike, including officer comments from the Greater Cambridge planning team, all of which are taken into account before a recommendation is proposed to elected members. So if a decision is made today for elected members to withdraw from the Joint Development Control Committee, JDCC, it wouldn't remove their voice as residents or representatives. So that's the key point really to make on that one. Furthermore, in a similar way to what Graham's already said, the public speaking rights that exist at both JDCC and the County Council's Planning Committee allow representations to be made directly to the decision makers. So that process won't change either. In relation to written statement 11 that was received from Councillor Dave Bajan of Cambridge City Council, he acknowledged his work serving on the JDCC and raised 4 separate points that, if I may, I'd like to respond to in turn. His first point was in relation to the accord between the 3 councils and the knock-on effect of making constituents part of the decision-making process in the area that sometimes has confused responsibility. What I would say to that is that officers from all 3 councils will all still work together to ensure concerns of local residents and elected members are taken into account in the decision-making process, which, like my answer to the written statements 3 and 8 that I've just given, will ensure that everything is taken into account before a decision is reached. Furthermore, in relation to the confusion over responsibility, I do agree with this wholeheartedly. I think there is always confusion when you have a 2-tier structure for anyone within that area. However, having some county applications determined by the JDCC and others by our own planning committee is actually adding to that confusion. A prime example of this was when we had the Abbey to Chesterton Bridge that was considered by the planning committee at the county council, and the Chisholm Trail, which ran alongside that was actually considered by JDCC. So I actually think the changes that are being proposed here would have all county applications considered in the same way, which actually would help with the element of the confusion. In his second point, it relates to a wider democratic mandate of decision making, providing improved outcomes. Now, whilst I can understand the point that's being made here, I'd suggest that considering planning decisions come to a planning meeting, so those that are considering, planning decisions come to a planning meeting open to the items in front of them, and they're not predetermined to any opinions or decisions being made. So the right to speak process allows the different knowledge and the experiences to be highlighted, and that's for the consideration of material planning matters ahead of a decision being reached. So both JDCC and the county's own planning committee allow local members to speak, and this wouldn't be lost if a decision is taken for Cambridgeshire County Council to withdraw from JDCC. His third point is that things that happen in Cambridge City can have wider implications that should involve all 3 councils involved in the decision-making process. And I'd agree that that's the case in all areas of the county, particularly where development in one administrative area can actually have a larger impact on a neighbouring district rather than where the development is occurring. An example of that could be heavy commercial vehicles, HGVs, that travel through the villages. It's a prime example of where we get the cross-boundary issues across the whole of the county. So I don't think that this is unique to Cambridge. Nonetheless, in the same way as highlighted in my response to his second point, the ability to hear from local councillors and residents as part of the right to speak means that such matters are considered ahead of any decision being taken in the same way as they are at present, so that wouldn't change. So I suggest there is no difference in assessing the planning merits of any planning application or the process undertaken by officers. The only difference will be which elected members vote on it. Moving to his last fourth point, it relates to an unintended consequence of improved networking and a wider understanding of the three councils. Now, given that the officer relationship and joint working is not proposed to change, I've assumed that this relates to political networks, which can no doubt be addressed through other means other than the JDCC. So if I can move to written statement 21, which was received from Edward Lee. He touches upon the critical importance of JDCC for the Cambridge Fringes to ensure that spatial and transport planning decisions are made in a coordinated way. My response to that, I would say that any strategic growth planning applications will continue to be considered by the relevant city or district and county council, as already takes place in the Greater Cambridge area and across the growth sites in the other counties. So the JDCC itself is not critical to this taking place. The support from specialist officers, which includes input and technical assistance from a transport perspective, will continue, alongside the strategic planning coordination of these key areas, such as health and education matters in the negotiation of the Section 106. So again, there won't be any change to that. So the input, coordination and approach to spatial planning is not proposed to change in the event that decision is taken for county councillors to withdraw from JDCC, as it's not the committee that provides that. If I move now to the written statement 22 received from Councillor Martin Smart of Cambridge City Council, he acknowledged the quality and power of decision making by councillors of different authorities and different political persuasions and the quality of speakers attending the debates. Now, I would agree with him that both JDCC and the County Council's Planning Committee have excellent input from local communities and residents alike, and some excellent members that sit on both of those committees. Furthermore, in the case of planning decisions, these are not political and they're therefore based on material planning reasons and the adopted development plan. Therefore, even if a decision is made today for the County Council to withdraw from JDCC, I have no doubt that this quality of input will remain on both committees. Reference within that statement 22 was also made to damaging the committee and breaking partnership working if a decision is taken today to withdraw from JDCC. And from my perspective, the JDCC would not be damaged by losing county councillors voting on the items, as the excellent joint working that takes place by officers would continue to ensure that decision makers are given all the views before a decision is taken. So this is in line with the thoughts already given on similar concerns raised in written statements 3, 11 and 21 that I've already covered, as well as being relevant to some other similar concerns raised in written statements 23, 26, 32, 33, 37 and 39. So it is a general theme that runs through a number of the responses. If I now turn to written statement 23, which was received from Claire Ruskin from Cambridge Network, she raised the new structures being based on ineffective or inappropriate current structures. I just wanted to clarify that the proposals being considered today stem from member workloads and committee workloads, particularly taking account of the climate change emergency that was declared by the council and also the equity across the whole of the county. So there's no reflection made to any individuals or committees that I just want to make clear within that response. Now, one of the statements that came in, written statement 26, was received from Peter Studdart, and that raises a number of points in relation to JDCC. Now, some of these have already been covered in my earlier responses, but I think it's worth touching on some of these to demonstrate my consideration of his points, so that members of the Constitution and Ethics Committee can just get an opportunity to see how I've considered the views put forward. The first point I want to reiterate is the background to the proposal to withdraw from JDCC stems from member workloads and equity across the council. So it's in no way a reflection of the performance and success of JDCC over nearly 13 years. Furthermore, the processes that have delivered the success referred to are set to remain from an officer perspective. And if anything, there are actually opportunities to review the remit of JDCC to make it even better, particularly given that the City Council and South Cambs now have a shared planning service. The officer support and joint working will remain, so I truly believe that shared planning and transport delivery will continue. His second point relates to his view that this will provide a very poor message to central government as well as to local communities. And given the officer support and cross-working arrangements already in place, which are set to continue, I don't think this is the way the communication should be given or received. The ambition for growth and economic success has not changed, and without wishing to seem disrespectful in any way to any local resident, I don't think they would see any noticeable change to what is being proposed, other than potentially fewer members voting on the item. The third point relates to key partner working and a joined up approach in applications in the Section 106 stage, and as reflected in my response to written Statement 21, the county input into the vision and delivery of strategic infrastructure won't change, and neither will the joint officer working. So there shouldn't, if there is a decision taken today to withdraw from JDCC, I don't see that as being an issue. And the fourth point relates to the challenges for withdrawing from the JDCC don't stand up to scrutiny. And whilst I don't intend to go into any further detail than more than I have already, or be drawn into a debate whether JDCC is better or worse than the County Council's own planning committee and the processes that we have, or indeed whether Cambridge is unique when it comes to planning decisions, which I've already touched upon in response to written statement 11, I come back to the fact that there are different administrative processes that come as a result of JDCC, which the planning templates and the Development Control Forum being only two of these differences. They weren't exhausted by any means. And with the retention of the committee, it is the additional workloads for members, and it doesn't provide equity across the county. Finally, the written statements 32 received from Daniel Zeichner MP, 33 received from Trumpington Residents Association, 37 received from Jane Patterson-Todd of Cambridge Ahead, and 39 received from Councillor Mike Sargent of Cambridge City Council. These I've grouped together because they raise concerns around the loss of the JDCC and in particular implications of joint working, and in some cases see JDCC as the tailored solution for this happening. But as already covered in my previous answers, it's not JDCC that provides this. And the officer joint working arrangements aren't proposed to change. So the same specialist involvement and support will continue to be given across the whole area, and the planning process therefore will not change. So hopefully that covers in detail my response to all the related JDCC comments.
Thank you very much, Emma. And I note that Councillor Taylor's got her hand up, but you'll have an opportunity to question the officers at the end of the second bit, not at this moment in time. Thank you. So if I could now ask Stephen Cox to have his contribution, please.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat what Graham and Emma have said. They've gone through that in quite some detail. I'm happy to pick up any questions that members have got with regard to changes to the committees that are being proposed as part of the paper when we get to that part of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, so we're now going to move on to the next bit here. We've received requests from two of our partner councils to speak today. So I have used my discretion as chairwoman to accept these requests. I would now like to invite Councillor Lewis Herbert, the leader of Cambridge City Council, and Councillor Aidan van der Veer, the Deputy Leader of South Cambridgeshire District Council, to speak. After each speaker, and that includes the local county councils who will speak after these two speakers, the committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions. So if I could ask Councillor Herbert and to come to the stand. We'll say where you are actually. May I remind you that you each have 3 minutes. And so Councillor Herbert, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Every and committee members for the opportunity to talk to you on behalf of Cambridge City Council and also our community and businesses. I'm here to ask the committee to amend the recommendations on both the county plans affecting our city and agree to a proper consultation before you make improved decisions. There is no pressing emergency on this. There is time during the current far more pressing coronavirus state of emergency to undertake that consultation. So on withdrawing from the 13-year-old Joint Development Control Committee, I'll leave the comments on that to my South Cambridgeshire colleague, Aidan van der Veer. I just want to focus, Councillor Every, on the proposal to disband the Cambridge Joint Area Transport Committee, or CJAC. And you've heard 35 statements have been submitted. This committee has been successful, well attended, and been a voice both for the city and a partnership with the County Council for over 20 years. And if you just look at the County Council's website, it states that this is a joint committee of the County Council and Cambridge City Council. So at the very least, we would have expected a consultation before you made proposals for change, and there has been none. And we were only alerted to this, along with residents, a week ago. So I come to the view that what is proposed today is the wrong decision, done in the wrong way and at the wrong time. So I do ask that as partners, and because our partnership is vital on issues like this, particularly in tackling major congestion problems in Cambridge, albeit that this is incremental with traffic regulation orders and highways improvements, that we value that partnership and that you consult us properly and you consult our community. And that committee, that just hasn't happened. Turning to Mr. Hughes' point about the geography can be handled by a local county council member, that just isn't possible in a city which has 12 county council members, 42 councillors, a population of roughly 130,000 people. So if you take an issue like the recent consultation on the security barrier on King's Parade, that isn't just a small issue. That is an issue which businesses, councillors, people from across the city are entitled to have a say. We are very different to a community of 20,000 or 2,000. And CJAC, that committee, is our equivalent to a town and parish council. When the county council moves next year to Alconbury, that will be 24 miles away. And I believe that CJAC is the right voice and the right place, and it will be even more important when you're located in Alconbury. We have huge air pollution problems, and as has been mentioned, there is a climate change emergency. Traffic regulation orders, cycling, pedestrian decisions, parking, waiting, loading, our vision of having much more pedestrianisation in the city centre, it needs CJAC. So please, I plead with committee members, think of the people who are watching today, listening to the live stream, think of the impacts of this decision, think of the fact that there is time for a full consultation. So I urge you, please amend the decision that you're proposing to take. You have got plenty of time for a consultation, and that would be the proper way. We are your partners. We haven't been consulted as a city. Please give us the chance for a proper say, and you will come back with a much better set of decisions. Thank you, Councillor Every.
Thank you, Councillor Herbert. If you'd like to stay unmuted, this is an opportunity for committee members to clarify points of Councillor Herbert's. It is not part of the debate. So if anybody would like to ask Councillor Herbert any question, could you indicate by raising your hand, not raising your hand, but raising your blue hand, please? No, I haven't got any indication. So thank you very much indeed. So Councillor van der Veer, would you now like to address the committee, just as a reminder that you have 3 minutes? And I believe, Daniel, you're timing, aren't you? Hopefully.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Aidan van der Veer. I'm the Deputy Leader of South Cambridgeshire. I also sat on J Dcc from 2013 to 2018. And I'm really very grateful to you for allowing me to speak here about the issue of withdrawing from the J Dcc. The success of Cambridge over the last 20 years is built on effective governance and delivery structures underpinned by a desire to collaborate constructively towards a shared goal. The joint Cambridge Fringes Planning Committee is an excellent example of this. It ensures that we all have democratic input into the crucial decisions that are shaping the future of our region. Having the County Council as a core member of JDCC brings some specific benefits. JDCC deals with large, brand new developments, with almost everything having to be created from scratch over many years. This includes transport infrastructure, educational facilities, which are of course the remit of the county. These need to be considered as integral parts of these new places, and JDCC allows this. New schools, for example, play a vital role in the creation of new places, which go well beyond their purely educational functions, for example. Now more than ever, it is vital that we cement in really good partnership working across all of our public sector organisations and beyond. It is inevitable that this comes under pressure and that thoughtless mistakes are made. I personally made such a thoughtless mistake 2 months ago in my response to a letter from Mayor Palmer. The leader of the County Council admonished me in a public statement. He said, it's relevant to quote this, "The public expect us to work together with the GCP, City Council, South Cambridgeshire, businesses, the university and the mayor, all of whom have powers, integral interests and funding to attempt to solve the transport issues currently experienced and to plan for the future growth predicted. We at the County Council now expect to immediately go back to good partnership working that we know we are all capable of and are asking our partner organisations to do the same." The proposal before you goes against this statement from Councillor Count. JDCC is a partnership body, and the correct way of dealing with perceived issues with partnership bodies is to discuss them with your partners in advance. I'm particularly concerned that you are being asked to make a decision on JDCC with almost no consideration of the implications of the change and without a robust alternative arrangement on the table. We must be absolutely confident that any change will not impact on our ability to deliver these hugely important developments for our whole city region. We also have to consider how this move will be perceived by the other groups with a stake in the future development of Cambridge, who have been so supportive of our joint working over the decades, many of whom have actually made representations to you today, quite strong representations. Breaking up JDCC in its current form will send a very bad signal, leading some to question the commitment of the County Council to support the continued well-planned growth of Cambridge, just what we don't need to be doing during the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes. For these reasons, I ask you to take a step back from this decision to engage more fully with all partners on how we can maintain our excellent working relationships while addressing your concerns about the current structures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor van der Veer. Again, could you just remain unmuted? And if anybody would like to clarify anything the Councillor has said, if you could indicate with raising your hand, your blue hand. No, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to both speakers for coming along today. We now have some local members from the County Council who have requested to speak on this item. May I remind you that you have 5 minutes, and this does mean 5 minutes at this particular time. The extension for any other speaking belongs to the committee discussions. So first of all, could I ask Councillor Jones if she would be unmute and speak? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Well, I can. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm speaking as a past chair of CJAC and currently the deputy chair. And I'm extremely concerned about the proposed removal of a committee that has worked very hard and very effectively to deal with complex transport issues and to assist the County Council in making sound decisions, Now, I want to challenge the things that Graham Hughes has said. He talks about all rights still existing. He talks about democratic accountability still being there. Well, maybe it is, but it's getting more and more remote. I looked at the difference between Peterborough's population, which is just less than 200,000, and the population of Cambridge, which is now by estimates over 140,000. Peterborough's committees, I went back and looked at the minutes, a bit of a nerdy thing to do. They scrutinise highways problems, and lots of local councillors, because they're local councillors to Peterborough, are looking at all the highways problems, digging into them, talking about roads and highways and so on. CJAC is doing the same thing for the city. Local councillors with detailed local knowledge making judgments which help for county council to make good decisions. But under section 3 on page 17, Cambridge would lose this ability, and all the transport decisions would be made by committee members, all but one of whom live outside the city. So interesting comparison there. Secondly, I think it ignores the council's own vaunted principles of think communities. The council's very proud of its think communities approach in lots of policy areas. And at heart of think communities is working with local communities. That is what CJAC does. CJAC recognises the size and scale of Cambridge transport challenges, which are different, as Graham Hughes recognised, to other parts of Cambridgeshire. What other parts of the county have 7 million visitors a year, 2 busy railway stations, a network of crowded streets, and a huge and dense assortment of historic buildings? Under the one-size-fits-all logic, there is the argument, districts don't have a CJAC, so why should Cambridge? This is not just misguided, but it runs directly against your own think communities approach. Thirdly, I think it will engender a massive lack of trust. Residents don't always get what they want at CJAC, but they know their voices can be heard. Last year, there was standing room only at several meetings, and meetings were lengthy to ensure everybody could make their point. And they weren't just dealing. I think Graham Hughes is slightly disingenuous in saying it's just TROs, because as he very well knows, TROs themselves engender a huge amount of debate. There were lots of residence parking schemes that go through, so those have got to be dealt with when the pause is ended. And Highways Committee will not enable such participation. And that's even before it moves to Falconbury. Moreover, you need to think about the timing of Highways meetings. CJAC doesn't meet until late in the afternoon. Highways meets during key working hours, which means most residents won't be able to attend. Residents will inevitably feel their views are being brushed aside. Finally, I think if you read the paper, the rationale given for its removal is actually faulty. In 2013, quote, transparent and accountable decision-making, paragraph 3.1, was seen as important enough to justify a CJAC, but now it seems to be considered irrelevant. Conversely, in 2013, the fact that, quote, one area has a different service from others was seen as unimportant, but suddenly it's important. If districts in 2013 declined to have a joint area committee, paragraph 3.2, that was their choice. But it's now being used to justify the removal of a CJAC from an area that actually did want one. I think there's a misguided claim that closing CJAC would save officer time. I think it's much more, because actually we don't know yet, but it's just as reasonable a hypothesis to say that it's more likely to add to officers' time as they attempt to enact policy decisions taken in ignorance of local circumstances, and as they attempt to deal with the steady stream of resident discontent that then gets taken up to Transport Committee because there isn't a lower level consultation committee which can satisfactorily deal with it. So at the very least, I agree with the leader of Cambridge City Council that the decision needs to be postponed until there's some proper consultation, which as a Constitution and Ethics Committee, I would have thought you really need to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Just about right, Councillor Jones. Thank you very much indeed. And again, the same principle. If any of you wish to raise a question, please will you? Oh, hang on, I've got a chat here now. So, okay. So. Right, I've got no questions for you, Councillor Jones. Thank you very much indeed. So, Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to address the committee?
I'm not sure he's here anymore.
Anymore? Oh.
Yeah, I think he's dropped off.
Oh, was that intentional? Do you know? Is it worth giving him a ring and just checking? I wouldn't like him to, if it's a technical issue, not to have the opportunity. But what we'll do is we'll move on to Councillor Moschini.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I appear to have unmuted myself at the opportune moment. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak at this meeting. And before I go into my main point, I would just like to say I am a little bit disappointed that this administration is trying to push through this issue at this particular time of all times, when not only is it very important that we continue to work in partnership with our partners, and we are both, Cambridgeshire County Council and Cambridge City Council, we are both working extremely hard on a crisis. And this is not the appropriate moment to actually raise a potentially very divisive issue that is going to just provide a distraction from what should be our sole focus at this time. So that's one problem. And in effect, I mean, I've not been a member of this authority for very, very long, but the issue of the coexistence and cooperation between Cambridgeshire County and Cambridge City has come up in meetings in the past. And it is a little dispiriting and a little sad that it always seems to have a little bit of hostility when it comes up, and almost as if there should be some kind of competition or some kind of, disagreement between the authorities, and there really shouldn't be. And to make an example of this, I would like to quote, this is from the report that has informed this decision, which was circulated to members ahead of this meeting. And there's a quote, which is an answer that one anonymous councillor has left to the question, should CJAC be abolished? And the answer reads, Cambridge City is resentful enough as it is that not having any Conservative representation on the county council, they feel that the concept of Cambridgeshire held by the ruling group does not extend to cover the city. Now, these sentiments are very hurtful. They are going to cause a lot of hurt to many of us who actually, as Cambridge City Division councillors, we are extremely aware of the need to work successfully together and to actually, Cambridge is in Cambridgeshire, and there is absolutely no question about that. And we should not have these kind of feelings. And if these kind of feelings are informing this decision, then it really is not the right decision to make. To go on to my main point, I have had a look at this report that was circulated, which basically had the answers of 37 councillors who answered this survey, which dealt with their workload and answered questions about whether or not meetings should be, committees should be merged. And there was a question on whether or not CJAC should be abolished. The agree answers were 18, the disagree answers were 13. So the decision is being made to abolish CJAC. Similarly, for the withdrawal from JDCC, the agree answers were 14 and the disagree answers were 12. And on this basis, once again, the decision is being made to withdraw from JDCC. And finally, another question was asked where the agree answers were 20 and the disagree answers were 18. The agree answers were 20 and the disagree answers were 11. And this was the question of whether highways and infrastructure and E&E should merge. The agree answers outnumber the disagree by more than the other two questions I have mentioned, yet this decision is not being made. So I am actually questioning the basis on which these decisions are being made at this time. Other speakers have underlined that these decisions should be made followed consultation and not as a whim in the middle of a crisis. So I would beg you to please reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moschini. Any questions for Councillor Moschini? Please raise your blue hand. Right, I have two questions here. The first one is from Councillor Kevin Reynolds.
Is that for me?
Yes, for you.
Oh, hello.
Thank you. Like most members, we've been pretty overwhelmed with papers and reports. You started your presentation referring to a set of papers that highlighted the issue about there being no Conservative councillors on City Council. And I'm not sure what paper that's from. If you could direct me to it, then I can see what you're talking about.
Sure, of course. So this is in effect the combined and compiled answers to the survey that was circulated to members in January. And Democratic Services put all the answers that were received on a Word document and gave it to, I believe, group leaders in February, and with an instruction to circulate down to group members. So this is what happened.
Okay, yeah, so it's an older paper. That's why I can't find it. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Hickford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick, I was unclear what you were saying about which two committees were not being merged when there was a 20-11 agreement for them to be merged. Could you just say that again, please?
Sure, let me just bring it up again. I had made notes on my phone. So the question of whether highways and infrastructure and economy and environment should be amalgamated into one committee. 20 agreed and 11 disagreed. I mean, I'm one of those who disagreed, so I absolutely am happy that this is not being done. But my feeling is the same for all three.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, sorry, Madam Chairman, if I can come.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, but those committees are being merged.
No, they're not. They're just being
Well,
renamed.
It's part of this paper.
Right, okay. Anybody else want to come back on that? No, in that case, thank you very much, Councillor Moschini. If I can just advise that Councillor Richards has very kindly said that Councillor Kavanagh has fallen off and is trying to reconnect. So we'll just keep an eye on him as we move forward. So if we can go to Councillor Richards.
Hello, can everybody hear me all right?
Yep. I can.
Okay, thank you. Right, so good afternoon all, and thank you to the committee for an opportunity to speak. So I'm going to begin actually by paying tribute to and thanking officers of the County Council who are working tirelessly on COVID-19 on behalf of all of us and all of our communities. So thank you. Okay, so I've registered to speak today on the County Council's proposal to withdraw from J Dcc. So I've been on this committee for 3 years now, and it seems to me an excellent example of shared planning and transport delivery, of all three authorities working together on Cambridge and Cambridge Fringes growth agenda. I'm not at all clear why or understand why one authority might wish to withdraw, especially as it seems to be a unilateral decision. Engaging cooperatively in visions for new neighbourhoods seems key, as all three authorities have responsibility for these neighbourhoods, as they all do for Cambridge and Greater Cambridge growth agenda. So it seems to me essential that the County Council has a key role in seeing that the public realm and highways are integrated in the vision for new communities, and community infrastructure, transport, schools, libraries are considered and taken into account at the outline application S106 agreement stage and at the detailed design stage. Now, on the two arguments the paper puts forward in 4.7 and 4.8, well, you know, I'm not actually convinced. So if we look at 4.7, it says, firstly, J Dcc runs on different democratic processes and templates, which means that applications and officers' reports that go in front of the J Dcc are in different formats and have different process expectations, such as the necessity of a development control forum, which the County Council's Planning Committee does not have. Now, you see, this development control forum is an opportunity for local democracy. It's a forum where petitioners can present their views to councillors, officers, and the planning officer. So the aim is to build consensus early in the planning process. So there's a really good example of this in Darwin Green, where the local community who had very strong feelings and wanted to bring those feelings, they wanted to bring their points to the planning committee. They had a petition and everybody sat down on one afternoon and looked at that petition and discussed it. So, you know, that seems to me to be democracy in action. So I can't see why that would be a reason for withdrawing from the Development Control Forum. In fact, I'd like to see more of these control forums for residents. So the second one is that, secondly, there is not another joint committee in any other part of the county. So the issue of equity identified for CJAC in paragraph 3.4 is also relevant here. So there are similar grounds for withdrawing from this arrangement moving forward. Well, I'll let, people have obviously spoken on CJAC today. I'm focusing on the JDCC. Well, the new developments in Cambridge are largely across boundaries, and that is very significant, and there's benefit from a joint approach. You know, cooperation and collaboration is best practice. So rather than removing this out of fairness, why not actually extend that out, extend that practice? I also feel, actually, the end of July, I really don't think we should be taking up a valuable officer's time in this current crisis. And I think that we should leave it, and we should have this proposal should go to a public consultation with public engagement. I think this is very key. And I'd also say that this is the time when opportunities for collaboration and cooperation should actually be embraced. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richards. Any questions for Councillor Richards? No? Any sign of Councillor Kavanagh, or do we believe we've lost him for good? No? Okay, in that case, we'll move on. So I would now like to ask the Executive Director of Economy, Transport and Environment, along with the Joint Interim Assistant Director of Environment and Commercial, to address more of the points raised in the questions, but also comments that they've heard from the Council's questions today. So if I could start with Graham, did you want to come back on this? And then you will all have an opportunity to ask our officers questions. Do any of the three officers want to say more, or would you just prefer to just take questions? Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I think it'd probably be easier just to take questions. I was taking notes as the speakers were speaking, but I don't think there's anything sort of specific that I need to come back on right now.
Okay,
Chair, thank you very much.
Emma?
Yeah, what I was going to do, because I've made some notes, was come back on some general themes, and then if there's still questions, then I'll happily take those. Actually, just following on from something that Councillor Jones said about being quite nerdy and looking back through the different committees and the different minutes, I actually did that same exercise for JDCC. And went right back to the 2007 and looked at exactly what had been done, just really so we can put it into context. So personally, I wouldn't say that's nerdy, but then people might say I'm a nerd, so we'll see. But just to put it into context, since 2007, county council applications that have gone to JDCC in total add up to 11. Of those 11 that went forward, one was pulled in, it was the Fawcett school, because it came under the Trumpington Meadows area, and that was for a mobile and a toilet block. So that wasn't actually a strategic application, so you could probably say whether you think that that was strategic or not. Another was related to the Chesterton railway station that was done initially as a county council application, but then couldn't be implemented. And the third one I'm going to refer to was a condition approval for that same station that was never implemented. So out of that total of 11, you can probably deduct 3 from them. So that just helps put into context what we're talking. It's less than 1 a year. So again, I don't want things to be blown out of proportion, and I don't want people to think that I haven't looked back as to why this was first established and also what's gone through it. Again, I'll come back to the fact that nobody is saying that the work that has been done by any of the committees hasn't been really good, and the people that input and the members that sit on them haven't done an excellent job. So I will just come back on that. From a city deal perspective, of those 11 applications that have been taken in the last 13 years, only 2 relate to city deal. And as we move forward, a planning performance agreement has already been signed across all the offices. So again, I would actually say that the offices have really good working arrangements, and I don't see that changing at all, irrespective of what the decision is made about the JDCC. And actually, for some of the strategic applications that are coming forward, if I take two as an example, the relocation of the Cambridge wastewater treatment works in Cambridge Northern Fringe East would actually come forward as a nationally significant infrastructure project. So the NSIP wouldn't actually go into any of our committees, and neither would the Camborne to Cambridge busway if that comes forward under the Transport Works Act. So again, I would just say that not everything that's strategic and the growth would come into these committees, but nonetheless, the officer contributions and what we do across those boundaries will remain. So I really do want to emphasise that as much as possible. In terms of the processes moving forward and about there being robust alternatives, I would actually say that nobody is proposing that the JDCC doesn't continue. And in fact, the discussions that I've already had with colleagues, my equivalent, for example, at the Greater Cambridge Planning, Sharon Brown, we've talked about opportunities that we've kind of talked about in the past anyway, are looking at how we can make that JDCC work even better between the officers, because the process that gets done through those planning applications won't change irrespective of the decision made today. So the alternatives are already in existence. JDCC would continue for all of the growth sites. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing to suggest that that wouldn't be the case. And the County Council's own applications would go into the planning committee that already exists. So I will say that the alternatives are already there. I agree that the officers are spending a lot of time at the moment with the COVID-19 situation, and we're looking at redeployment of staff. So that is all acknowledged, and I'm sure all of the members of staff will be really pleased with the thanks that have been achieved. In terms of what would need to be done if a decision is made today, there wouldn't be from a county council officer perspective any need to change anything other than the delegated references. The Constitution, I think, from what I've looked at, and I'll stand corrected if Michelle Rowe has a different view, we wouldn't really need to change that much to be able to put into place what is being proposed and considered today. So there would be no real extra work for officers on that. And in terms of cross-boundary applications, I would say that we do get cross-boundary applications already across the wider county. And also we look at the different growth sites as well. So again, from an officer perspective, we do have that really good relationship, and I don't see that changing. So I think that covers everything that was picked up.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Stephen, did you any more that you wanted to say, or you're just happy to take questions?
I'll take questions just to say, to reinforce that Councillor Hickford said, what we're doing is creating more space by creating the Environment and Sustainability Committee for it to take on the responsibilities for climate change and the environment on the back of the strategy that's being prepared. And also to add that some of its functions around economic development will be going over to General Purposes Committee to help create some of that space for it to focus on climate change. That was it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. This is the opportunity of members of the committee to be able to ask questions of the officers. So if you would like to question one of the officers, could you do your blue hand? I noticed Councillor Scott's already done hers. But could you identify which officer you want to speak to, please? So does anybody other than Councillor Scott want to ask questions of the officers? Councillor Scott, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Every. Mine actually is really by way of a request for a clarification. There was a difference of opinion between Councillors Hickford and Moschini over whether two committees had been abolished or not. And it would be appreciated if we could have clarification about this, because the way I read the agenda, both Councillor Moschini and Councillor Hickford are actually right. So we're in the happy position of there being ad idem agreement on this. As I read the Constitution and Ethics agenda, which I'm looking at, item 1 is the abolition of the Economy and Environment and Highways and Infrastructure Committee. At the same time, item 2 is the introduction of the Environment and Sustainability Committee and the Highways and Transport Committee. So what has happened is that Councillor Moschini is actually correct. Councillor Hickford is correct in that the highways and the economy and environment have been abolished. But Councillor Moschini is correct in that these committees have been reconstituted. So in fact, the 2 committees have been replaced by 2 committees, so there has been no cutting down on the work level. Perhaps somebody would confirm that that's correct. And the second point I would just like to make, it would be greatly appreciated if we could first discuss the proposed abolition of the Cambridge Joint Area Committee as one item, and then if we could discuss the withdrawal from the Joint Development Control Committee, because they're 2 separate items on the agenda. They are 2 items that are distinct and separate from one another. And I as a councillor and a member of this Constitution and Ethics Committee, would very much appreciate it if we could deal with the 2 items in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Can you lower your hand, Councillor Scott? So now we actually are going to move on to the debate. But before we do that, may I thank the officers for coming along. Don't go. But we're very grateful for the input that you have put in, particularly as some of those statements only arrived very late yesterday, but were all included, and we appreciate that the analysis will have taken some time. So I am mindful, because obviously we do have the 6 items here, and I've already had a chat from Councillor Jenkins on the screen to say that he would like to have them debated separately. So what I thought we would do is that there's been very little discussion or statements about items 1, 2 or 3. So I thought if we were able to discuss those first and then do 4 and 5, and I don't know whether Michelle is waving at me to say no you can or no you can't, I don't know, but I'm quite appreciative of that the content of each of those is very different. So I would be advised by Michelle. So because we'll all, Councillor Hickford, you've got your blue hand up.
Madam Chairman, thank you. It was just that Councillor Scott was asking for a response from officers concerning the abolition of 2 committees and the formation of 2 committees, and I thought you might go to Steve Cox for clarification on that. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to do it.
No, okay, we'll go to Steve. Thank you, Councillor Hickford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, really to confirm what Councillor Scott was saying, we are proposing to abolish two committees, Economy and Environment and Highways and Infrastructure. The terms of reference for the 2 new proposed committees, Environment and Sustainability and Highways and Transport, are in the papers. And what we've done by that is enable the Environment and Sustainability Committee to be able to absorb quite a significant additional workload around climate change as arising from the motion last year, so that we address the needs of the strategy and the delivery of the strategy going forward, and the committee is able to take that on. So it is both proposing to abolish 2 committees, but to create 2 committees with slightly different terms of reference for them. Thank you.
So if I may refer to Michelle, I would normally do it quietly, but I'll have to do it across the airways.
Chairman, you have the discretion to organise the meeting however you think fit, and if you think that's the most logical way, then that's appropriate.
Well, to me, it seems to be clearer that if we deal with the structures of those committees, 1, 2 and 3. So is there anybody who would like to speak on that? Right, Councillor Jenkins, I've lost you.
I'm here.
Councillor Jenkins, would you like to speak? We're in debate now, so you have more than 5 minutes, but please can you be concise, and it'll only be just over 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the reorganisation of the policy committees, not about CJAC or JDCC. I'll talk about them later. I can understand why we started off combining 2 committees, but still ended up with 2 committees. I can understand the thinking behind that. and I'll be, by and large, be supportive of it. Looking at the powers of the Environment Committee, it has in it to recommend to Council and monitor the Council's climate change and environment strategy and environment fund. Now, that's positive as far as it goes, but it's a bit weak because all it does is monitors and recommends. And I'd like to propose that we expand its remit to give it some form of scrutiny power. Now, what I'm going to do now is copy and paste onto the chat line some extra words. There you go. And I can read them out now to you. So this committee would be able to require a review of any decision of other committees, including GPC, if it is felt that it would cause any negative impacts on sustainability and/or climate change. The decision review shall be triggered by a majority of members of the committee submitting a request to the monitoring officer or chief executive within 3 full working days of the date on which the decision notice was published. Due to the costs and delay caused by review, it is intended that it should only be used in exceptional circumstances. Where the review process is initiated, the implementation of the relevant decision shall be suspended until the process is complete or the review withdrawn. If a decision to review is successful, the procedure set out in part 4.7 of the Constitution shall be followed, with the only differences being: 1, that the requesting committee for the review is the Environment and Sustainability Committee, and 2, if the request is to review a decision of GPC, then this goes to full council. The intention is just to give some power to this committee to be able to make something happen and to make sure the right actions take place. And I'm not sure if those words would be accommodated as such in that scheme of delegation, or would be woven in some other way into the Constitution. But I'd like us to agree on that as a principle.
Sorry, Councillor Jenkins, this is an amendment.
It would be, well, if you'd like to take it as an amendment, yes.
Do you have a seconder for this amendment?
I think so. Councillor Taylor hasn't unmuted her microphone, so. But she's
sorry, I'm trying to tick the little symbol that says yes. Does that work?
Yep.
Oh, I don't know. We haven't tried the little symbols yet. So is that Councillor?
I would be very happy to second Councillor Jenkins's amendment.
Oh, in which case, then we will need to debate the amendment, I believe. Michelle?
Chair, basically what my understanding, if I'm correct, Councillor Jenkins, is that you're basically asking to amend part 4.7, the decision review procedure, which is in the Constitution, which is not actually being debated today or discussed as part of the report. Therefore, one suggestion is that we work up a proper report for the next meeting of Constitution and Ethics that covers that, so that it can be debated with all the necessary information, or if members wish, they can consider it today.
If I may respond, I appreciate that it's not in the format of the existing delegated authorities, but I thought it would be a reinforcement of the item 3rd from the bottom of the list.
Well, if we have to make a decision of one or the other, I could, may I ask Councillor Hickford to speak? He's put his hand forward.
Madam Chairman, I just wanted to come in because we're getting on to amendments, and I would have thought that we would have needed to actually propose the recommendations as per the agenda to actually get on to amendments, etc. Maybe I'm wrong. I would have thought that would be the correct way of doing this. And if it is, I'm very happy to propose the recommendations as per the agenda so we can move this forward. I I ask you to decide on.
Chairman, if I can come in there, under our constitution, the recommendations put forward in the report by officers are considered automatically moved. So you are okay, the recommendations are on the table at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
So are you're recommending the whole report then at this moment in time? Councillor Hickman.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, are you talking to me?
Yes, I am.
Oh yes, I'm very happy to recommend as per the agenda. I mean, we've heard a lot of communications from councillors and residents today, and we've heard some very detailed responses from officers, which I'm very thankful for. And it's good to see that a virtual meeting can have this sort of interaction. It really is. So I'm really pleased with that. I'd just like to say that, you know, we are looking at a review of all the committees, not just CJAC and the JDCC here, which is what this paper is about. So, yeah, I'm very happy to propose the recommendations as per the agenda papers.
Oh, you're talking about 1, 2 and 3 at the moment, aren't you?
You can come back to me for the rest whenever you like, Madam Chairman. Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, I think that's, has anybody else got, oh, sorry, we've got Councillor Scott.
I'd just like to say that that I would support Councillor Jenkins' proposed amendment if we're going to debate it at this time. If we're not going to debate it at this time, if it's possible to go forward, but to take on board that proposal from Councillor Jenkins would be dealt with effectively and substantively at some time before the change actually occurs, because it should occur as a part of what goes to full council when this matter will have to go to full council.
Okay, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you. Just to clarify, is it part of this committee's function to carry out a civic scrutiny role? I'm not certain about that, so it's like clarification. And while I've got the floor, I'm happy to second Councillor Hickman's proposal.
For 1, 2 and 3, okay.
Chairman, just in relation to scrutiny, as everybody knows, we have a committee system and scrutiny is inherent within that process.
Okay. If there's no other speakers, I think what we will do is take Councillor Jenkins to another committee, if I may say so, Michelle, and we'll revert to the information that we've got here, as you suggested.
I think Councillor Jenkins wants to come back on that.
Yes, 2 points, and I don't want to delay this meeting unnecessarily. But following on what Jocelyn has just said, if we can be confident that this committee will take this idea further forward at a subsequent meeting and address it properly, I'm happy that it not be an amendment that we discussed today. But there is a need for some organisation, some mechanism, some process to exist whereby the great policies that we've got about climate change, etc., and the climate emergencies do actually get followed through. And we need to find a way of making those cast iron. So let's make sure it goes on to the next agenda, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jenkins. Michelle, is that okay?
Chairman, I think that's very helpful. I think we can then prepare a proper report. I completely understand what Councillor Jenkins wants to happen, and we can investigate that and prepare a proper report in response.
And that has been supported by Councillor Stutzer. Thank you very much, and also Councillor Taylor. So that brings us on to item number 4 for discussion, which is the abolition of the Cambridge Joint Area Committee. Right, so this is open for discussion now. So if you wish to put forward a view, could you please raise your blue hand? I have only one. Oh, sorry. I have only 2. That's Councillor Taylor. No, okay. Right, so if we could start with Councillor Scott, who put her hand up first. Thank you.
respect, I think that Councillor Taylor did, but also have we taken it on board then that we've actually passed recommendations 1, 2 and 3?
No, there we've got a proposer and a seconder. We will go through and do the, what we'll do is we'll split these because we haven't actually taken a vote on that. So when we come to the recommendations and voting, we will break them down. So first of all, we'll do 1, 2, 3, and then it looks as if we will be doing 4, and then 5, and then 6.
Thank you. And I'm happy for Amanda Taylor to precede me.
Okay.
She did have her hand.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Jocelyn. That's appreciated. I'm not normally a member of this committee, but I was asked by the Lib Dem group to come to this meeting to put the Cambridge perspective on CJAC. Now, constitutional amendments are not the first thing that my constituents usually talk to me about. Transport and traffic, that's another matter entirely. It's a city where people are living pretty close together. We've got a daily influx of commuters, students and tourists, and traffic is usually what people talk about. It's top of most people's agenda. So what happens when you mix up the constitution and traffic? You get a political hot potato. Now, I hope you've all received the 39 representations from people who wanted to exercise public speaking rights about the changes to CJAC. And I must say, I have over 20 emails from my own constituents, maybe some other Cambridge councillors have too. When you multiply all that out, I think it shows just how much Cambridge people value the committee. It gives them a forum where they can have their say on matters that directly affect them, which is what local democracy and communities is all about. And they can see their own councillors taking decisions. I've been a member of CJAC since it started in 2013, and I was its first chair. And we've dealt with a wide range of traffic issues, parking restrictions, including residence parking, one-way cycling, traffic calming, coach parking, protocols for e-bikes, quite a range of issues from the large to the small, but many of them affecting more than just one area of Cambridge and therefore more than just the domain of one particular county councillor or group division of people. The CJAC's always been really well attended. Sometimes we've had to move into the council chamber, and sometimes we've had people in the corridor because there hasn't been room in the crisis room. As one of the speakers who you didn't hear described it, it's an effective voice for the community. I'm here today really to say it's the wrong move, not only because the committee is valued by people, but also because it is reducing local democracy by the fact that we won't have those people from Cambridge or local councillors who know the area, know the Cambridge area. We will be making less well-informed decisions. The report, the only rationale given for this decision, it's not financial or anything like that. It just seems to be that the writer doesn't see why Cambridge should be different from any other areas. It's a really strange argument, given that all districts of Cambridgeshire were offered the same opportunity 6 or 7 years ago. I think Cambridge is different from the rest of the county in many ways. It certainly has many more thousands of people coming in for work, study, lots of tourists, also people coming in for our 2 hospitals. We have the flip side of that. We have extra air pollution and congestion. The other difference, as we're at the Constitution and Ethics Committee, is a constitutional difference in that, unlike other parts of Cambridgeshire, Cambridge is unparished. We don't have town councils or parish councils. So if this proposal goes ahead, we will have a democratic deficit, and Cambridge will actually have less of a democratic structure than other parts of the county. The report does not explain how Cambridge is going to be better off without CJAC. Actually, it doesn't say how any other area is going to be better off too. There is very little rationale for these changes. And I believe it's not only the wrong move, but it's also, and this is very serious, it's being taken at the wrong time. There were many people amongst the would-be public speakers who raised this issue. I think there were over 20 of them it said how it was the wrong time. Not only were they not allowed to speak, those comments weren't read out, and they were completely ignored by both the officers who responded to the public questions. We're in a national crisis in Cambridgeshire, as elsewhere, in lockdown, with people dealing with all sorts of difficult circumstances. In my area, there's many people working round the clock, looking after their families, trying to keep it going. Many of them are at Adam Rutz Hospital, trying to keep people alive. This meeting is taking place virtually. People cannot exercise their normal public speaking rights. And as so many people have pointed out in the representations that were sent to us, it's underhand and it is not fair process. As one speaker described it, it's an affront to both ethics and democracy. To sum up, I don't think we should be damaging local democracy and transparency by removing CJAC or pulling out of JDCC. There is no right time to do this, and it certainly isn't now. So I would urge other members of the committee to reject this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I actually had the good fortune to listen in to the Communities and Partnership meeting this morning. I went in via Zoom in some way and listened. And I must say I was extraordinarily impressed by the level and the intensity of the work that is being done by officers who reported to that committee. And I come to this issue of workload. What was made clear during that meeting was that officers were being redeployed so that they could work on this very important issue that confronts every single one of us, not only in Cambridgeshire, but in the country. And in fact, it's a global issue. But if we come back to Cambridgeshire, this issue of COVID-19 is being dealt with effectively by the officers in conjunction with the Communities and Partnership Committee. Now, there's been nothing before this committee, the Constitution and Ethics Committee, at all about COVID-19. And I'm surprised at that, Chair, because I note that you are a member of the Communities and Partnership Committee. And why I raise this at the beginning is because what I could see was that officers were stretched. And yet here we are before Constitution and Ethics, stretching officers in order to serve this meeting, which is dealing with Constitution and Ethics issues, which are not time specific and which could be dealt with at another time when people are not grieving, when they're confronting death, when they're confronting illness, and when they're frightened and quite rightly scared. And I do have to register that in my view, it's absolutely inappropriate that we should be sitting here on this afternoon dealing with these matters and taking up the precious time of officers, which could better be spent on actually addressing the COVID-19 issues that are creating such an issue within our community. Now, I secondly come to the issue specifically of the Cambridge Joint Area Committee. I served from 2013 through to 2017 as the Deputy Chair, then the Chair, then the Deputy Chair, then the chair of that committee, and had enormously positive experiences in terms of the work that the officers did, in terms of the way that the committee worked in such a cooperative manner, and in terms of the way that members of the community, residents, came before that committee and made their voices heard. Sometimes what we were agreeing before that committee was received with adulation, but always before that committee there were people who didn't agree, and that's the nature of democracy. That's why that committee is absolutely vital, because it allows residents to put their views, to put them strongly, and the committee addresses them and deals with them in the context of the community with which it's dealing and the community that each one of us represents. And as we know, that committee deals majorly with traffic regulation orders and with LHIs, local highways initiatives. Now, the local highways initiatives go through that process and then do end up in the Highways Committee. And when they end up in the Highways Committee, they end up there in the way that other LHIs, local highways initiatives, end up, which have come up from other parts of the Cambridgeshire community. And those have come up outside Cambridge City from discussions between district councillors with county councillors, because often they wear two hats. And so there has been the opportunity at that local level for full investigation of those matters.
We missed about a minute. Your internet apparently is unstable at the moment.
Oh,
so
then I have.
Just go back 2 sentences, because we just missed a couple of sentences there.
Oh gosh. Okay, thank you. I was proceeding about the way that the Cambridge Joint Area Committee deals with both local highways initiatives and traffic regulation orders. And in the local highways initiative sector, members of that committee address those local highways initiatives applications, come to decisions about them. We have representations from members of the community on the proposals that they put forward. So at that local level, very local level, those matters are addressed. Now, then the local highways initiative projects go before the Highways Committee for final sign-off. And they go forward up there together with local highways initiative proposals that have come up from around Cambridgeshire. And those proposals have come up through local involvement, because they come up through district councillors working with county councillors in those various divisions, because often the county councillors wear two hats. They may be a district councillor as well as a county councillor, and even perhaps a parish commissioner. So that has operated at a very local level, the local highways initiative projects, just as in Cambridge under the Joint Area Committee they do. And when they come before the Highways Committee, the Highways Committee can be assured that all those local highways initiative projects have gone through a democratic process, not only in Cambridge, but through the whole of Cambridgeshire in its entirety. If the Cambridge Joint Area Committee is abolished, then those LHI projects will go up before the highways in a very different way from the way they are dealt with in other parts of Cambridgeshire. And that means that the residents of Cambridge will be disadvantaged as compared with the residents of the remainder of Cambridgeshire. As to traffic regulation orders that come before Cambridge Joint Area Committee very often do raise considerable concern and involvement on the part of residents. Now, the proposal as put by Mr. Hughes, the director, was that the officer would deal with these and consult with the local councillor. That means the local councillor, we all do this anyway, we go out and talk with our residents whenever a traffic regulation order that's got some particular impact arises. We do talk with our residents. However, what we're being asked to do then as local members is to actually put a view to the officer and take a side, because if there are two lots of the Cambridge residents that are in disagreement with one another, how do we actually present that to the officer in a way that actually assures the officer that the matter has been dealt with effectively with the residents and that the residents' views have been properly taken into account?
Councillor Stutt, you had 7 minutes now. If you could wind up.
I shall certainly wind up, and I thank you, Chair, so that this proposal not only disadvantage residents, but it disadvantages the officers. It doesn't cut down on their time in any way at all. And I do just conclude by going back to the point that this is the Constitution and Ethics Committee. In my opinion, it is not ethical for us to be dealing with this matter at this time when there's distress out there in the community, when there's grief and when there's shock and fear, and when the officers' time would be better spent on actually dealing with COVID-19 issues, as I'm sure that they would rather, than dealing with us in this Constitution and Ethics Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Councillor Jenkins.
Thank you. I shall be a little bit more brief. We've heard from the two members of the committee who are councillors for Cambridge districts, Cambridge wards. The rest of us, of course, are councillors for division outside Cambridge. So we can only base our decision on the evidence that is presented in front of us because we don't have any hands-on experience of the operation of CJAC. And I must say, it's really rather difficult because if you look at the papers 3.4, it gives two reasons for this abolition. It says under 3.4, it is considered unreasonable and inappropriate that one district have a different arrangement to another. Well, by whose criteria is it said to be unreasonable and inappropriate? We've heard earlier this afternoon about how significantly different Cambridge is from any of the other districts. So it would seem to me that it was entirely reasonable and appropriate because they have a different set of challenges and a different set of needs. So that's really not a reason for making the change. 3.5 gives the second reason for making that change, which says, well, we'll make the change because there's another way of doing it. That's not a reason for making a change. That just says there is an alternative and you can take it if you want. But what's missing from this paper fundamentally is any sort of analysis of the change. You don't make a change without looking at the advantages and disadvantages both of the existing system and what you're proposing to move to. And in the absence of that analysis, I cannot possibly make a judgment. This is a meeting in public. The papers are in the public domain. I don't have any evidence in front of me which enables me to make a decision. What we have at the moment is a system which is local, democratic and effective. Councillor Scudder says we've got bigger things to worry about than this. Maybe I should ask you, Chair, shouldn't we just postpone this, as Councillor Lewis said, and come back to it in 6 months' time? If you would entertain that, I'd be comfortable and we could move on to the next item. Otherwise, I cannot support a change to something which works perfectly well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no more speakers on item number 4. So can I move now to speakers, please, for item number 5, which is withdrawal from the Joint Development Control Committee for Cambridge Fringe.
Shall I ask the question?
Sorry?
I asked you a question. I said, would you entertain postponing this for 6 months in line with what Councillor Lewis Herbert suggested? Because we've got more important things to do than mess around with committees that are working quite effectively. Thank you very much.
Yes, it's not our intention to defer at this moment. Right, so could I go on to item number 5, please? Have speakers on 5? Can you press your raise hand button on your participants? At the moment, I've only got 2 speakers on this. Councillor Harford, are you trying to say you want to speak? Councillor Harford, can you unmute, please?
Yeah, I have indicated. Have I not?
Right, you have now. Yes, thank you very much. Are there any others? I have 3 speakers on this particular item. And at the beginning, I have Councillor Scott.
I've had a fair go, so I'm happy to let the other 2 go before me, and I'll speak last, if I may. Thank you, and I'll be short.
Okay, Councillor Jenkinson.
I shall also be short, and to some extent I will repeat what I've just said about CJAC. The reason for making this change are in the papers 4.7 and 4.8. supposedly 2 reasons. Firstly, it says that JDCC runs on different processes and templates, but simply being different is not a reason for change. Anyway, the difference with respect to planning, as far as I can see, is a matter of format, not of content. So that we have expert officers who can quite easily reformat their argumentation and substance for different formats. And then item 4.8, the second reason, exactly the same as my comment before about number 3.4, it's entirely reasonable and appropriate to have a different system for a different part of the territory if the challenges and needs are different. So the 2 reasons for change, again, are not reasons for change. We don't have any arguments in favor of the change. I've hunted through the papers here, which are in the public domain. There's nothing there. So in the absence of a well-argued case for change, you should stick with the status quo. And anyway, we've got more important things to do, as Jocelyn has said, and no doubt will say again. This is a nonsense, Chair. We're pushing stuff through without evidence upon which councillors can make decisions. We shouldn't have papers like this. This is wrong.
Thank you. Councillor Harford.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to all those people who took the opportunity to provide us with their views on this particular item. I want to assure them that the fact that they weren't there to articulate them themselves does not mean that I haven't read and considered every word that they submitted. I'm a little bit disappointed that there seems to be some confusion about what withdrawal of the county council from the JDCC might mean. Like Ms. Fitch, I'm a bit of a nerd too, and I went back and looked at the history of the JDCC and came up with exactly the same figures as she did. So the amount of delegations that will be withdrawn from consideration by the JDCC are not considerable in any manner or means. I think it's a great shame that when I read the comments that have come in from various organisations and individuals, that there does seem to be some confusion about what our withdrawal at the committee table actually means. It does not mean a withdrawal from partnership working. I am quite convinced that the JDCC will go on, as it quite rightly should, between the 2 participating councils. The 2 district councils, the City Council and the District Council, apologies for that. The whole point is that people will still have the opportunity to present their views, to challenge, to comment in exactly the same way as they do now on those applications. I cannot believe that 2 councils that currently collaborate on their local plan will not collaborate to look at the strategic growth sites together. And so that will allow exactly the same opportunities for people to present their views and comments. So in terms of the county council's contribution, do people really think that at the preparation stage that the county council won't be there putting in its advice about road infrastructure, etc.? It will participate in the Section 106 negotiations. Obviously it will, mostly because most of the big ticket items are actually county council items. So we mustn't confuse this with a democratic deficit. People will still have exactly the same opportunities to participate as they currently do. The county council will still give its very important and valuable advice about the infrastructure items within any strategic application. And quite honestly, it doesn't really change anything at all. And I do wish that people would accept that that will be the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hartford. And now back to Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I was just struck by what was stated at paragraph 4.2 of the report when it went back to the history back in 2007, when this county council and officers from the city and South Cambridgeshire went to the cabinet because the issue had been raised by the Minister for Housing and Planning on the basis that there was a major increase in complexity and size of the task in terms of delivering growth, and that there was a need for a shared leadership agenda. And what happened was this council went back in joint community with the other two, the city and South Cambridgeshire, saying this was the way that we should address the matter. And it doesn't seem to me that there's any good reason for not continuing to address the matter in the way that's being done through the Joint Development Control Committee. I was also struck by the fact that if this proposal goes through, then what's going to happen is that officers will consult with the city and South Cambridgeshire as to how the withdrawal will go forward. Now, I'm wondering whether this will therefore be considered to be best practice, just as in the part of the report that deals with CJAC says that they'll be going back to the city on the abolition of CJAC to follow best practice, to involve discussions with the city council. Now, it seems to me that best practice surely cannot occur by doing something after a decision's been made. As in the case of the Joint Area Committee, the discussion shouldn't be taking place after the decision's been made here, but should take place ahead of time, just as Councillor Lewis Herbert said. And in relation to this withdrawal, instead of deciding to withdraw and having to go on best practice and discuss it with South Cambridge and with the city, it seems to me that best practice surely dictates that the discussion should take place before any decision is made. And I'll end on saying this, that from a Cambridge City point of view, I speak, and I say that I have always welcomed the involvement of the county councillors from outside Cambridge in discussions that we've been able to have that have been joint. And it's very clear from what Councillor Richard said in relation to her work on the joint committee that the councillors on that committee welcome the input from the county councillors that come from outside. And it seems to me that this idea of joint working together, which has been replicated so well in relation to COVID-19 emergency, is being carried out on that committee. Though on the one hand we're saying this involvement together on COVID-19 is excellent, as was said this morning on communities and partnership, we're now saying we don't want to do it in relation to the Joint Development Committee. I say that the withdrawal would be wrong and that there needs to be proper discussion before a decision is made, if that is the way that some members consider the decision should go. I believe that this committee does play a very significant role and that county councillors play a significant role on that committee together with the city and South Cambridgeshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I have at the moment no more speakers on this item. If you wish to speak, can you press your raise hand? If not, I'll move on to item number 6, which is increase the membership of General Purposes Committee from 15 to 17. Do I have any speakers on this? Councillor Hickford.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to say, I think this is a very sensible proposal so that we can include all the chairs in proportionality on the General Purposes Committee as per the papers set out before us. I'm very happy with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Right, in that case, we will go to the vote on agenda item 3. And as we said at the beginning, do I have anybody who would dissent from voting on 1, 2 and 3 together, then 4, then 5 and then 6? And in fact, we could actually do 1, 2, 3 and 6 together as there's been little discussion on those 4 things. Do I have any dissenters on that? Just raise your hand and the blue. Right, thank you very much indeed. Okay, then we are going to go to the vote on items 1, 2, 3 and 5. And I'm going to ask you please.
No. Madam Chairman, 6.
6. 6. Sorry.
6.
6. 1, 2, 3, 6. Thank you very much indeed. So, councillors, would you please unmute, please? And if you agree with the recommendations as 4, and if you disagree, against or abstain. So, first of all, Councillor Connor.
4.
Councillor Harford.
4.
Councillor Hickford.
4.
Councillor Jenkins.
4.
Councillor Reynolds.
4.
Councillor Scott.
4, but it's regrettable it's being dealt with at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Taylor.
4.
And Councillor Every, myself, 4. So that is unanimous. So then can we take item number 4, please? The abolition of the Cambridge Joint Area Committee by the end of July 2020, following the discussion set out in paragraph 3.3 of this report. So again, same principle. Councillor Connor.
4.
Councillor Harford.
4.
Councillor Hickford.
4.
Councillor Jenkins.
Against.
Councillor Reynolds.
4.
Councillor Scott.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Every, 4. Nick, could you give us the result of that, please?
Yes, that the result is 5 in favour and 3 against.
Thank you very much. And agenda item 3.5, the withdrawal from the Joint Development Control Committee for Cambridge Fringes by the end of July 2020, following the discussion set out in paragraph 4.4 of this report. Okay, similar procedures. Councillor Connor.
4.
Councillor Harford.
4.
Councillor Hickford.
4.
Councillor Jenkins.
Against.
Councillor Reynolds.
4.
Councillor Scott.
Against, and it's regrettable this matter dealt with at this time.
Sorry, Councillor Scott, we lost you there. Are you there?
I said against, and again, it's regrettable that these matters are being dealt with at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Against.
And myself, Councillor Every, 4. Nick, could you please report on the result of that?
Yep, the results from us are also 5 in favour and 3 against.
Right, thank you very much, everyone. We're now moving on to agenda item 4, which is the proposed changes to the consideration of adult mental health guardianships. And I'd like to welcome Joseph Yao, who has been here all this time, I have to say, in a corner somewhere. So are you still there?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm still here.
Could you...
Sorry, my camera is somehow reversed, so you can't see me, but I hope you can hear me.
Yes, only latterly. So can you, only when you came at the end. So if you can speak up. So we'd like to welcome MCA DOLS Manager Joseph Yao, who'll be able to answer any questions from members on this report. And Michelle, would you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. The report asks the committee to consider a change in the way adult mental health guardianships are determined. As you will see from the report, we have very few guardianships, which makes it difficult for members to develop a good knowledge and experience of this area of the Council's work. It's therefore proposed to establish a new process to deal with guardianships as set out in paragraph 2.4. And as the Chair has said, Joseph Yao is from the Adult Safeguarding Team and will answer any technical questions for you.
Thank you very much indeed. So any members of the committee wishing to make ask a question or a comment, could you please raise your hand in the blue box? No? Oh. Well, thank you for coming, Joseph. That's...
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So, so any other member of the committee wish to speak before we, are we wanting to debate this? So has anybody got anything that they would like to say about this, please? Yes, Councillor Harford, I see you waving.
Sorry, it's just
I can see you.
Press the blue hand.
No problem. I can see you.
Thank you. I suppose in some ways this particular agenda item gave me more problems than the previous one, because we are talking about some very sensitive issues here. And I think I was just a little concerned that one of the reasons, or the main reason for abolishing it, seemed to be that councillors don't currently play much of an active role in it, because they don't have the opportunity to develop the experience and knowledge that is required to be able to comment on it. And I suppose if we're only dealing with a very small number, to a lot of people, it would seem that it's not something we should be worrying about. But I do feel that councillors do have a role to play that isn't necessarily immediately acknowledged, and that is it's understanding about people and watching that everything we deal with, particularly sensitive issues, are dealt with properly. I have to accept from what officers have said that this is this is something that is such a specialised area that it is difficult for members to participate fully. But I have to say that in reading that does grieve me, because I do think that somewhere in the council there should be somebody who does have sufficient interest in this to be able to participate more fully in terms of collaborating with officers to come to the right decisions. So I'm sorry, it's not something that's going to deter people from voting either way, but it is on my part quite a regret that that is the case.
Is there any reassurance, Councillor Harford, that you'd like to take from Joseph while he's still here?
Can I come in on this?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Chair. Now, basically, as far as I know, there are not many local authorities adopt this method of scrutinizing the guardianship. And I can assure the councillor that there's no watering down of the safeguards that are still in place for either the person who's been subject to the guardianship or the nearest relative to make appeal to the tribunal. And it is also, when they make the appeal to the tribunal, it's legal aided, so there's no cost to them. So I can only reassure the councillor that, as I say, there's no watering down of the safeguard. The safeguards are still there for people to activate if they chose to.
Thank you, Councillor Harford. You wanted to come back on that, did you?
Thank you so much. I do want to make it absolutely clear that I had absolutely no criticism of the decisions that officers will come to in terms of this. But as I tried to make clear, I do think that councillors have an undefined role in looking at things that affect people in such sensitive areas. And I just have this regret that there is nobody within our number of 61 who is sufficiently interested to take part in overseeing this. Please, I want to assure the officer, this is no criticism of officers. It's a regret in terms of the role that councillors play.
Thank you, Councillor Harford. Councillor Reynolds.
Yes, thank you. Can I just say that over the years, I've been involved with these hearings, And I think the councillor does play a valuable role insofar as it's a lay role, and it adds checks and balances to what's going on, and it gives relatives peace of mind. But can I say, in all the hearings that I've attended, the recommendations put forward to us by our officers have been 100% correct and very professional. I think it's just the way that it's presented to the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no other speakers, so we can go to the vote. And the recommendation is to recommend the changes to the Constitution as set out in paragraph 2.5 of the report to full council for approval. And again, if you could, some of you are unmuted anyway, I notice. Again, it's for, against, and can you please unmute your microphone? Councillor Connor. Where's he gone? Councillor Connor, you're still muted. Has he left us? Oh, I'll come back to him then. Councillor Harford?
For.
Councillor Hickford?
For.
Councillor Jenkins?
For.
Councillor Reynolds?
For.
Councillor Scutt?
Yes, agree. Yay, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
For.
And Councillor Every? Yes, for. Councillor Connor, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I am.
Are you
and the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So that was a unanimous vote in favour of the
Thank you.
recommendation. This moves us on to agenda.
Can I leave the meeting now?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here.
Thank you.
We can
Bye-bye.
see an empty desk. Thank you very much.
Thank
indeed.
you. Bye.
Scheme of delegation. Michelle, would you introduce the report, please?
Yes, I bring this report to you every time at the same year because there's a requirement in our constitution that requires council to agree the scheme of delegation at its annual meeting, which is coming up on the 19th of May. So you're therefore asked to recommend the scheme of delegation to council for approval.
Okay, so if there isn't anybody who's going to dissent, I think, does anybody wish to speak on this? We can, no, we can take it to the vote. But actually, is anybody dissenting on this? In which case, raise their hand. Otherwise, we'll take it that everybody's in agreement with this. Okay, so in that case, we'll assume there's a unanimous vote in favour of the recommendations. And last of all is the Constitution and Ethics Committee agenda plan. The committee is due to meet next on the 30th of June 2020, and the arrangements for this meeting will be confirmed nearer the time. In the light of the emerging situation, the monitoring officer will be presenting a report at that time based on members' responses to a consultation on the LGA draft model code of conduct, but that is all we have on the agenda for now. I'd like to thank you all for coming and watching remotely, especially to those people who've been watching it live streamed. I wish you all the very best of health, and thank you very much for your time and your goodwill on our first virtual meeting. I declare this meeting closed.
I raised my hand and wanted to speak.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Missed you.
I just presume that the next agenda will include an item on the scrutiny of climate change activity.
Yes, Councillor Jenkins, we agreed that. Right, so if you wish, you may leave the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.